Thank you. And we're up in 4. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you. I want you to meet me on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social. santitajackson.bsky.social. And at Santita J, yes, I'm still on X. You're there. At Santita J. And then, of course, Facebook /Santita Jackson and Friends. Facebook /Santita Jackson and Friends. That's where you can meet me. And of course, we're on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I need you all to like and subscribe and like and share. We've got our Rainbow Push International Conference, June 12th, 13th, and 14th. And we're all going to be there, and we need you there. We need you there because you need to be there. My father would often say, as a top orator, he used his gifts and his earning power to pay staff. Dr. King did the same thing. So that was not, my parents didn't live lavishly. They've lived nicely. We've been blessed. But my father said, greed and need, remember, they're real close. How many outfits can you wear at once? How
That's
many
right.
can you drive at once? Don't be needy for those things. God will supply your needs. And Reverend Dr. Otis Moss Jr., Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III's father said, God will supply your every need, not your every greed. That having been said, my father would say, yeah, Push can't afford me, but I can't afford not to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Because our people need me and they need what we do.
Yes.
We are seeing a rollback on our civil and human rights, the likes of which we haven't seen in generations. Oh, be very clear. Don't say that nothing has changed. You don't have to ride on the back of a bus. You don't have a Jim Crow America to live in. If Black women are sexually assaulted, we have recourse. That was not always true. That was not true when I was a child in the 70s. Leslie?
True.
They did all manner of stories about that, Livonia and Naima, when we were growing up in Ebony and Jet magazine. I didn't quite know what I was looking at, but now when my grandmother told me why she would not look at Roots, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
She said, do you know why we look as we do? She said, do you think I want to be reminded?
Yeah.
She sounded like Rosa Parks. There's a book at the dark end of the street that talks about how she would see herself in the mirror and she saw all of the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And that kept her fighting. She was famed for investigating the intimate assaults of Black women. She was the state secretary of the NAACP when it was illegal to be a member. So the America that they knew is not the America that we know. And yet the struggle continues, everyone. There is a study that shows that more than 7 billion people on the planet do not have full command of their civil rights.
That's
7
right.
billion. It's not just in Gaza. That's in the United States. That's what the fight in Burkina Faso is about. They're like, no. The Sahel, Burkina Faso, and Niger and Mali, they're like, no, we want France. Your foot is on my neck. That just got to stop. You come here and you take my gold, you take all of my minerals. No, that's got to stop. I'm making you rich while I'm poor. That's got to stop. So that's why we're meeting on the 12th and the 13th and the 14th of June. And I want you to come on. We don't turn anyone away at Push. We don't have those kind of conferences. We have comings together. Do we not, Livonia? You know that.
Absolutely. In Chicago.
That's right. At 50th and Drexel. We come together, Leslie. And we are with each other. And we go from event to event. We're going to have Pastor Jamal Bryant. We're going to be boycotting, demonstrating at a Target store.
Excellent.
If you want our money, then you need to do right by us. And until you do right by us, thank you, Seeley, everything you do is going to crumble. We're going to have Reverend Dr. William Barber. We're going to have Dr. James Zogby. We're going to have Ariel Gold. We're gonna have Livonia Perryman. We're gonna have no, it's true. We're gonna have all of these people with tremendous institutional knowledge. We're gonna have young people. We're gonna
That's
have
right.
students there. We're gonna have everybody there, and you need to be there, including my AM 950 radio family. Some of you came down last year. I was so gratified to see you, and I do hope that you all will come in. We are really basic. We're gonna get some food, some sandwiches, and if we need to go out and get some buckets of chicken, we'll do that too, because that's how we do things, because it's tough for everybody. But of course, we're sending out our love and prayers to the people of Los Angeles right now.
Yes.
They are living basically under martial law. I'm going to tell you, I said in the last hour, I had an experience in 1992. I was in Los Angeles when they had a federalized National Guard. The difference between then and 1965, when you had a federalized National Guard in Alabama, was that the governor requested that the National Guard be federalized and brought into Los Angeles in 1992. The president unilaterally sent the National Guard into Alabama to save the lives of these black students who were trying to desegregate the University of Alabama. So it's a different time, everybody. It's a different kind of time. We're losing access to our money. There will be no penny, which means we're on a mission creep to losing cash. If you lose cash, that means some wizard of Oz or odds is going to control your money. Is that the way you want to live? Really? The president of her class at MIT just tipped her hat to, she said it's wrong to kill people, it's wrong to starve people, it's just human beings. You can insert here, you can put in the people of Yemen. You can put in the people of the Sudan. You can put anybody in there. It is just Gazans at this time, okay? They would not let her walk across that stage in front of her family. Came in for that, y'all.
Well, and it wasn't just MIT. It also happened at Columbia. It also happened at GW, where students who spoke up about the genocide in Gaza were suspended, were not allowed to get their diplomas. And in some cases, investigations were opened into them as possibly being terrorist supporters for what they said at their graduation speeches.
It happened at the University of Chicago. They were denied their diplomas last year. They were denied their diplomas, their degrees. They had to undergo an investigation to get their degrees. This is not just happening at those schools that we've mentioned. It's happening everywhere. And I know how it happens. I've told you about my Harvard experience. I don't want to exhaust that. I've seen it. When you stand up for them, that becomes a problem. So, but it's happening. We're getting a social credit score on everything if you speak up and out. That's why we're meeting in Chicago, and we need you to be there, because we need to be in solidarity with each other. You need to be as concerned about Gaza and you need to be concerned about the Sahel, and you need to be concerned about Yemen. Your ears need to perk up about the Mississippi Delta and Appalachia, and Compton, and the west side of Chicago. Let's keep on going. There's a lot of pain and misery everywhere, and we have to be concerned about it. And the good news is that we have something we can do about it.
Democracy is being impacted around the world, attacked around the world. Democracy is being attacked around the world.
You know we don't have it. Let's keep it 100. The Democratic Party eliminated the primary last year, so that we have a republic that has democratic aspects. And we're trying to move toward a democracy, and you have oligarchs and corporatists who are pushing back against us. We're the ones who have to push on through. Livonia Perryman, award-winning journalist, is with us today. Of course, Leslie Williams, Jewish Voice for Peace. I'm so glad to have you, my sister, with me today.
Good to see you.
All right. And Naima Latif, who's fresh off of an incredible interview with one of our sisters from Burkina Faso. Of course, it's the Female Solution Global radio and TV show. It's on every day of the week, but you've got to see that, because we need to talk about what's happening. I mean, my brother Jonathan, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, is on Um, he's on foreign relations. And we were on the Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson radio show this morning, Leslie in Livonia. And I just said, wait a minute, Ibrahim Traore has lit up the African diaspora,
That's
but all
right.
freedom loving people everywhere. He said, oh my gosh, he's a man after everyone's heart. So you know what? Let's get started. Okay. I've given you all a lot of runway, but there's a lot to talk about because I've got whiplash. I'm trying to get through my night last night and I'm seeing tear gas and all this other stuff in LA. I said, wait a minute. I can't. Wait, I thought we were talking about Elon and Donald Trump. They will fight, and guess what? And they will get over it. Look, if you don't talk about Palantir and how they have wrapped their hands around our necks in our government, and how the Supreme Court just said that Social Security can turn all of our data over to whomever, I think you are missing the point.
Well, Doge is turning our data over to everyone.
Because these are the tech bros. That's what they were there to do. Mission accomplished. Right? So Hey everybody. So let's talk about what the big issues are and what you want to get out of this convention and this moment, because everyone talks about 2026. You know what? Leslie Williams, I'll let you get things started. 2026 is here. And the people in Houston, Texas will have been without an elected representative, a congressperson, for almost a year. Governor Abbott refused to have a special election until November. Sheila Jackson Lee died in July. Sylvester Turner died in March, hours after the State of the Union address. March, that's the third month, until the 11th. They will not have a representative. And I want to hear the Democratic Party talk about it. I want to hear Republicans talk about it. I think every American ought to be outraged that whatever tent you're under, you're not going to get any representation. But what is bubbling up for you as like the big issues or big issue as you see them, Leslie Williams?
Well, you started out talking a little bit about Project 2025, which is also linked to Project Esther. And these are both projects that have been in the works for a long time before Trump got back into office. And these
Can you describe Project 2025?
So Project 2025 and Project Esther are both connected to the Heritage Foundation, which of course is a very right-wing and historically very racist organization. And it sets up a blueprint for all the things that we've been seeing Trump doing. So things like getting rid of the inspector general so that you don't have a watchdog within these organizations, destroying the balance of powers so that Trump is gradually getting more and more control over the judiciary. There are so many people, not just on the Supreme Court, but on the other federal courts that were appointed by Trump and subscribe to his right-wing ideology. And so it should not be a surprise to us that we are seeing this gradual, and I would say at this point, it's not even gradual, I'd say a very fast erosion of democracy. Of course, what I focus on primarily is Palestine, but it's interesting that Palestine is really being used as a wedge issue to allow more of these right-wing projects to go forward. So one of the goals of Project 2025 was this mass deportation of immigrants. How did that start? It started with the attempted deportation of Mahmoud Khalil, who's a Palestinian student leader at Columbia. And that is opening the door and making it, normalizing the idea that you can deport people who have not committed a crime and who, in some cases, as in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, were not even visa violators. And so this may have started with Palestinians, but then who did it attack next? Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was shipped off to El Salvador with absolutely no evidence against him. And more we are seeing now that many of the same organizations, right-wing organizations that were celebrating the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil have also been enthusiastic about ICE's raids on undocumented Latin American immigrants. So for example, the Anti-Defamation League's president Jonathan Greenblatt, spoke at a meeting of Republican attorneys general a couple of days ago. And he was not only talking about Palestine and about the supposed anti-Semitism and protests against Palestine. He said that people protesting Palestine are anti-American, anti-capitalist, and that they are in league with the radical leftists of Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, teachers' unions. He accused the National Education Association of being part of some left-wing conspiracy. So he is going full MAGA. He is fully in league with these right-wing forces that are also trying to deport immigrants. And what does it mean to say that you're opposed to Occupy Wall Street? That, in other words, you feel that the anti-Palestinian movement should be in league with the ultra-capitalism that was opposed to trying to restore any kind of racial equity and economic equity to the people of the United States. So when we talk about solidarity among all these movements between immigrants, between Arab Americans, African Americans, and frankly, low-income working class people, it's not that these are separate issues. These are all very deeply connected, and we have a lot of the same enemies, a lot of the same people that are trying to get us to ignore Gaza and continue to spend US funds supporting Gaza. What could those billions of dollars that are currently going to Israel do for our communities, for our educational communities, for our healthcare, for getting people out of poverty? So instead of that, those people are focusing on sending money to Israel, which is another very militaristic, fascist country, and a country that is supporting our military, our entire surveillance structure. You're talking about Palantir. So it isn't as though these are really separate issues. They are very deeply connected.
They are deeply connected. And, that's why I'm looking at the Elon Musk Trump fight. And it sounds like it's deeply personal because he broke the bro code when he brought his intimate life. Men don't do that. They don't.
Well, just one other thing about Musk. So Musk convinces Trump that the real victims of genocide are white people from South Africa. And that at a time when he is deporting people from Latin America, people from the Middle East, people from Africa, who does he want to bring in? White South Africans who were part of the white apartheid system. And I think that shows you just that one incident, how all these issues are connected.
Absolutely. And Peter Thiel, because it's a whole group of them. He's not from South Africa, but he's from Southern Africa. Mm-hmm. And people have to understand that whole region was basically South Africa.
Yeah.
Namibia, all of them. That's what they were.
And Peter Thiel has said he wants a king, that he doesn't think democracy is a good idea.
Absolutely. And and guess his cover is Alex Karp, mm-hmm. who is a Black billionaire who is the head of his company. So, we have to be very careful. That's why you have to understand black faces in high places won't save you.
Yes. Candace Owens won't save us.
No, she, because I'm still trying to figure out how she's afloat, because she goes in hard in the paint. And I'm like, mm-hmm. anyone who's done that has not lived to tell the tale. But who am I to say? Naima Latif.
Yeah.
Issues. We can get into that. I think she's a very, very bright young woman, brilliant even. What makes me very sad is that I don't see it being used in the best way. For her not to tell people that the NAACP saved her when she charged her own high school system with racism. For her not to talk about that, and for her to tell me and try to convince me, go hard in the paint on George Floyd and say he died of an overdose, not being choked to death, you telling me my eyes are lying to me. And I don't understand that. And you want to tell me that your children are as white as they are black? No, they aren't, sugar.
No.
This is America, sweetheart. This is the one drop rule. But, these are issues.
And there's a brainwashing that happens to us unless we are very heavily grounded in our identity, our history, our culture, our purpose. When we go to these higher education institutions, we are brainwashed and definitely programmed to be against ourselves. So the only way that doesn't happen is if we come out of a household where our parents prepared us with a vision of why we're going to school. not to try to be approved of by someone else or imitate someone else or take on the attitudes of someone else, but to be powerful enough to be able to liberate our people and to be able to change the conditions that need to change. As a child, I remember the very, very intense programming and brainwashing done under the guise of religious teachings, even talking about the Israelis being the chosen people of God.
Mhm.
This is what you learned in Sunday school at the age of 3 years old. So many people can't see the human rights issue because they've already been programmed to think that, well, these are people who God has chosen, therefore whatever they do, that's what God wants. And then I think about that, the words to the song from the movie Pocahontas. You think that only people
That look like you are people.
like you. You think that
Mhm.
only people are people who look and think like you. But if you
Mhm.
walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll find things you never knew you never knew. So when we look at what is happening with the people in Gaza and the similarity of struggles when it comes to oppression, oppression is oppression. So we have to erase that programming that says, well, God has decided that certain people should have a land and that's theirs and this is what God wants and we're anti-God if we speak about the rights of the Palestinians. We have to erase all of that brainwashing and look at human rights with one yardstick. If it's wrong, it's wrong, and that's it. Now we also have to realize that because there's intense political pressure to not take that stand publicly and all the punishment kind of activities that happen with students who speak out and professionals who speak out, we have to speak up for them and constantly reiterate their right to speak, their right to stand for what's right and speak out for what's right and free ourselves from the dependency on people who we fear are going to fire us from jobs if we say something. That's why independent media is important. That's why independent business people are important. That's why the connection between all of us and supporting each other is important so people can have the power and the fearlessness to say what's right, because that's the only way we're going to change things.
Well, indeed, because by talking with each other, I think one of the blessings that I've had in having this show, and inadvertently ending up with a coffee clutch on Sundays with all of you, is that it gives us a chance to really vent from without being told what we cannot say. I mean, you're careful enough. That is to say, you want to say things in a way so that you're not offending anyone, right? That having been said, um, it is very, 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 very important uh, to understand the role of the Black church. The Black church is the only institution where the Black sensibility, it reigns supreme. That is to say, you know, you can preach if I say so. You can sing if I say so. I'm not using a white standard. I'm using mine. Now, but then you need to understand the Schofield Bible, which which was a perversion of Christianity and a perversion of Judaism. It's just a lot. And so I think that we as responsible people, Livonia and Leslie and Naima, we have to begin to take responsibility. We can't be, we can't say, well, I just didn't know and I'm tired. No, honey. You need to understand the Bible you're reading. You need to know who wrote it.
Yes.
You need to understand why they refused to give a name to the beloved disciple, even though Jesus revealed himself to Mary first. Huh?
Mhm.
How is that? I mean, you're not going to ask those questions? That's spiritually mature. That's why we're coming together, because we're the only ones who are going to save us. Nobody's going to come. No, look, and guess what? The people who come and guide us, we don't appreciate them until they get out of here anyway.
Sadly.
That part, right? So, so I'm just going to put it right there. But you know what? That's all right, Naima. I'm bringing you right on up. Lavonia Perryman. Now you've been in this a minute.
Well,
Excuse me.
well,
Why?
a few decades.
Well, no,
A
but
few.
that's a great thing. The good thing is no one could
Right.
tell. Hello, I'm not mad at you. That having been said, when you look at what's happening in Los Angeles, and just as you look at the movement, because you have been in presidential politics and local politics and state politics for more than 40 years, right? So you saw us when we could not. You know, what people on part of what the Jackson campaign did, Leslie and Naima, and Lavonia saw it because she was in it. We had black Republicans for Jesse Jackson
Mm-hmm.
because black people had no seat at the power table.
Right.
Period. Now, in the Reagan era, you weren't going to run to promote his platform. No way. But this was not his run was not to save the Democratic Party. It was done. It was to save us and democracy and the republic because we had some trouble for a while. You know, this is the man who opened his camp. One of his opening events was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where they killed Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. Are you serious? And no one would say anything? Wait a minute. You didn't have the liberal titans of the party, the eventual nominee, Vice President Mondale, Senator Ted Kennedy. They said nothing. Nothing. And Reverend said, you got to be kidding me. And then you're going to come to Chicago when we're trying to get our first black mayor, which was a big deal 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked you not to come. And you came anyway. And then you expect me to vote for you because I have no alternative? No, no, sir. It doesn't work. No, sirs and ma'ams. It doesn't work that way. Lavonia, why do we need to be meeting now?
We need to be meeting now because the Los Angeles situation is just a example or just a jump off point, which could what could happen in Chicago, or what could happen in Biloxi, Mississippi, or Shreveport, Louisiana, or Detroit, Michigan. Los Angeles is only the what we can see. But if you look at the history, when you mention Republicans for Reverend Jesse Jackson, I think of names that Armstrong Williams, Samuel Jackson, Senator Brooks. I mean, there were folk who were there. And then I look at Los Angeles, where, remember, the mayor is a black woman, Bass.
Karen
Remember
Bass,
that. Think about how this is working. All of us, not all of a sudden, the plan, and I keep telling folk, the 2025 plan was a plan before Trump was elected. It was a plan, a book written, created, edited by our neighbors who are Republicans or who look like Elon, who had philosophies like Elon, who had philosophies like Trump. This is not by accident. This was a strategic plan of action. It is almost like they were laying in there for warfare. So why? This is warfare for those who believe in democracy. So the plan must be activated. So that's why it's so important to be at the meeting, the 12th, 13th, and 14th. This is not new to Rainbow Push. It is not new to the people who are part of Rainbow Push. Rainbow Push is a group of individuals, a huge tent. And I want folks to understand, this is not just a black and brown issue. I keep saying to people, when you have a race problem, not only black and brown people are impacted by it, the world, the people, the neighbors, the citizens, the jobs, the schools, everybody is impacted by racism, like it or not. Those people who took over January the 6th, impacted by racism, because they're not addressing what everyone has said thus far, that they need to look at the human element of our country, of our world. I just read, you shared it with me. Democracy is under attack, not just in my neighborhood on Burlingame and Dexter. It is being impacted all over the country, just so folk will understand. In Africa, for the last darn near century, think about this. There have been the Chinese influence in Africa. In Africa, the United Kingdom has been there before, forever. So all of a sudden now, the folk who don't look like me want to have sent over to America people from their country. Nothing is by accident at a certain level. Trust me on this. We must be the resistance. Think of the World War II. We are the resistance. Don't look
or
around
Star
the corner.
Wars.
We are the ones who can make a difference. And this is an intergenerational conversation.
Mm-hmm.
This is an intergenerational warriors movement. This is a diverse group of people have come together, regardless of race, creed, or color. We look at, I'm Catholic. We look at the Pope. When the Pope was identified, you would have thought that Obama had returned. I'm just giving it like I see it. And so hope on that moment and in that time, regardless of if you were Baptist, Muslim, atheist, or whatever, they said, maybe a man from Chicago could make a difference, because it gave us hope that we were, and you know the country, you know your friends, everyone here I'm talking to, everyone is watching. From January, when Trump was became president, there's been a quiet. We got to get past this. Just let me get through the next 4 years. Let's hide away from the news. Let's hide away from the issue. Let's hide away. You can't hide. You cannot hide away from a person who is the spokesperson. Now, remember, Trump didn't create it. He's the spokesperson to dismantle voting rights, to dismantle education at all levels, to dismantle, diversity in the workplace. He is the spokesperson. And at my last point for a moment, I believe that most of this is driven by money and power, the need for money and power. We can talk about human rights. We can talk about education. We can talk about diversity. But at the end of the day, that 1%, and those people we never will see, the billionaires or trillionaires, we will never see them. Trust me, because if you have power and you have money, you're not trying to send up a memo. You're not doing that. They are trying to protect their individuals, those people in their circle. I wouldn't care if it was 1%, 2%, 5%. This is about money and power. And it will impact the issues, the policies, and the voting in America and around the country. That's where we are. So that's why I believe that this conversation should be carried over to the convention. Everyone is always invited to Rainbow Push conventions. This one is very critical because this is where we can lay out a conversation. But guess what? You don't leave Rainbow Push convention without a challenge, without a policy decision that you can look at and go back home and really have some sort of say so. Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. will say, well, maybe you should run for school board. Or maybe you should look at the policy. Maybe you should check in with Mrs. Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, and say, what can I do to make a difference in LA? Because trust me, what you're seeing in LA today is going to look like Chicago, Detroit, Mississippi, et cetera, et cetera. It can happen that way.
No, it is already happening. I mean, and the thing is, it is about power, because, and the power and the people, those whose name you dare not speak because you don't even know them, the people who really, the puppet masters, they're so wealthy that they put the billionaires out front.
Yes. Yes. That's right.
I mean, they have money that you cannot even count, because all of these fights are. When you look at Gaza, it's a power fight. Africa, it's power. It's resources.
Yes.
I mean, people, look, everybody, of course, I'm just speaking generally, Leslie, because the fact is, most folks, I contend, do not believe. They're not believers. They don't believe in God. They don't really have religious beliefs that they live by. Because if they did, the world would be run very differently.
Well, I think people believe in their own immediate needs. I mean, I often refer
which is ungodly.
Well, that I'm not going to argue with you about that, but I often refer to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That if you're starving, it's a little bit harder to see the larger ethical issues in the world. If you're afraid that your children can't go back and forth to school safely, that's going to be your primary focus. But those billionaires that you and Livonia were talking about, throughout American history and really throughout world history, they've been very good at a divide and conquer strategy. So the United States has always had this hierarchy of racism. People who look like the four of us have always been at the bottom, although Native Americans might argue about that. And then as various ethnic groups have come in, they have tried to find their place in that hierarchy. And for them, success and good jobs and good lives for their children were not just about rising in the hierarchy, but about pushing us down. And that is something that has continued for the last 400 years. So when we talk about solidarity, thinking about things like Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act, a lot of the pressure to keep that from passing was these billionaires paying for ads that were telling lower income white people, well, Black people who don't deserve it are going to get this, that welfare, Black people who don't deserve it, the Willie Hortons and the welfare queens are going to get that money, and they're not hardworking white people like you. So, Livonia, I think you're completely right that this conference does need to include, and we hope will include, people of all races who understand that when we only focus on what's in front of us and we don't look at that larger picture and we don't look at how this billionaire class is demonizing other groups and pitting us against each other to ensure their own power, that we all lose. And when we think of not only your father's Rainbow Coalition, but Fred Hampton's Rainbow Coalition in the late 60s, he was working with lower income whites from Appalachia, and he was working with Latinos, and he was working with African Americans, and he was making the point that these are all groups who are being exploited by the white power structure, and that the only way to protect all of us is for us all to work together.
Well, see, he was coming out of what Dr. King was doing. That's why, in solidarity with Dr. King, they predicated their beginnings on April 4th. Because it was the rainbow, that was what Dr. King was talking about. The creed of SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was to save the soul of America.
Yes.
Not Black people, white people, not white, Black kumbaya. No, it was to save the soul of America. And so we have always had people who were welcome. We've never as staunchly as Reverend Jackson has historically and Dr. King defended Black people, they invited everyone else in.
Yes.
That's right.
But we also had the understanding that our people, because we are at the bottom, needed something special. Because there were people in the organization at the beginning at the end of Breadbasket, the beginning of Push, who wanted Reverend to get rid of Frank Watkins. Frank Watkins was probably Reverend Jackson next to Lucille Conway Loman, his longest serving staff.
That's true.
White. And no one was more loyal.
Yes.
No one. And this was a Black man who was wonderful and brilliant. But I asked Uncle Frank, bless his heart, he passed on a couple of years ago. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, you see, I'm still here. Because your father looked at him and said, I'm not getting rid of Frank. Are you kidding me? No.
Yeah, Frank Watkins is the one that brought me involved with Rainbow Push, because I started working with, and he was working with media, and I would work with him and creating press releases and all that. He actually got me involved in Push. That was Frank Watkins, Reverend Frank Watkins. Yeah.
And so that's because we've always done that. The organization, Leslie, was started with my father's two white men at the University of Chicago Seminary. So it's always, there has been a resistance, I will say, with the white left to have Black leadership. And I think that was one of the problems, that as much as I love Bernie Sanders, and he had my support, and I love Bernie today, he came out of our campaign, quite frankly. They missed that piece. You can't just talk about classism when you've racialized class in the United States of America. You can't do that. And so, there's particular problems that Black people have. We're the only people, and even Indigenous people can graduate into whiteness. We're the only people who can't do that. Mariah Carey, when she first came out, you remember this was 30 years ago. You heard this woman, and she was a white girl who sounded Black. Look at her. But when you saw her picture, you went,
Is that Rachel Dolezal?
No. That was Mariah Carey.
Right.
Because that's how they sold her. But when they brought the picture, I was like, when the Pope walked out, I went, oh, okay. So, I got you. I got you, boo. But whatever you saying, if it's your story, I'm sticking with it.
It's your story.
Well,
And then
capitalism has always been racist. I mean, capitalism doesn't work unless you have an underclass that you could exploit, and that's how slavery became as widespread as it did. So there's definitely the need to recognize the particular ways that we have been exploited, to recognize reparations, not just for African Americans, but for the countries of Africa who are responsible for the wealth of Europe. And very few European countries have even begun to recognize that tremendous debt that they owe to the people of Africa that they exploited, and that the rest of American society owes to African Americans that they've exploited. But if we don't find ways to convey this to other groups in a way that they understand that the exploitation of African Americans is not helping them long term, they may think that it is. So, when you hear these people talking about the cost of welfare and the need to incarcerate more of us, and these are also some of the same people that are talking about illegal immigrants are taking my jobs and we have to deport. If we deport all these millions of immigrants, then our economy will be better. No, it's not going to be. I mean, we're seeing who is picking the food if we're deporting all of these people. There are so many ways that this focus on deportation is actually hurting our economy, is hurting the country. And the country works better if we do actually practice equity and we look at what's been taken from Native Americans, what's been taken from African Americans, what is being taken from Latino Americans and immigrants. I mean, a lot of the Mexican immigrants, they didn't move. We moved the line of the United States around them.
That's right.
And we exploited the braceros when we needed them. And then when we didn't need them, we suddenly decided that they were no longer Americans. So that history, which is a reason that a goal of Project 2025 is destroying this history. All these attacks against critical race theory and outlawing Latino history in New Mexico and Texas. This is all part of a strategy that they don't want Americans to realize, to remember this history and see this connection between all of these different people and how the right-wing capitalist system that Trump is part of and 2025 is part of is going to destroy all of us.
Well,
racism is the weapon that they use. I look at race as a beautiful thing in terms of our families. We have to call it like we see it. The race relationships in all of our families right here. If you're listening to me or seeing me, we have a diverse group of people in our families. So race is not race in itself, in the nature, in the gut of race is not a bad thing. It is a cultural, visual difference. But when you use it as a weapon to destroy a family, to destroy a community, to destroy a city, a state, a government, when you want to take down somebody, you take down that is most precious to the individuals or the group. And race.
Well, this is why we need to push for all these books that are being banned and taken out of schools and everything. Push for them to be bought in the homes. This is required reading in your home. Make sure you have this in your library at home, because no matter what, people can't take away your power to educate your own children in your home and make sure that they know their true history so that they have a right vision when they go forward into the world.
Not yet, but that is
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know all of us can remember this. Remember, it was a cultural and class and a necessary practice in the African American community to have the encyclopedia.
Yes.
If you had to pay for a year, 2 years, 5 years, it was necessary. It was the Bible was on the right side and the encyclopedia was on the left side. And so you're right. We have to take back our power, the power that we have as individuals, as a community, and as a tribe, and say we can teach our children how to read. We can teach our children the history.
Mhm.
We can teach our children math, and
Yes.
race will not be, it will be a discussion, but it won't be a weapon. Because once you educate those people who may have race relations, we have people who are marrying into, a diverse group of people. Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that, but you can make it against the law. Just think about it. Love of a person that don't look like you, based on government and policy, can become illegal. How did that happen? How did that happen? And are we going to accept it? We just got past that situation. We need to be the resistance right now. We do not have the luxury of just having a conversation.
Well,
We have
part
to
of
take action.
part of the reasons for the anti-miscegenation laws were in fact economic, because
right.
there was the wanting to preserve property in the white lines. So I mean, yes, we definitely, and I think African Americans do educate our children about our history, but it's also educating our children about Native American history and Asian American history and Latino American history, and seeing these commonalities and seeing how some of these same forms of oppression tend to recur, and also teaching about African history. But, another goal of 2025 is pretty obviously the defunding of HBCUs. And we're seeing this with the goal of getting rid of the education department and dubbing HBCUs as being racist and opposed to a meritocracy. This is a very clear strategy, once again, to destroy our history. The Librarian of Congress, Black woman, Carla Hayden, fired for absolutely no reason. And why? Because she is helping to preserve these stories, these histories about African American life and Native American life and Asian.
But wait a minute. Hold on, Leslie. That is the reason. See, because they will install black people who want to destroy black people. They will install indigenous people who speak Spanish, because that's what they are. Because they're about as Spanish as I am English.
I mean, there are definitely people who are indigenous and also would self-identify as Latino.
I'm making another point, because I also know I'm not English, and I know James Goldsmith, one of the great, should I say, a businessman of great fortune of the last century, married a woman, fell in love when he had fallen in love with one of his wives who was Mexican, who's Jewish, and she said, my family will object to the fact that you are Jewish. He said, my family will object to the fact that you're an Indian. He said her head snapped back, and I said, ouch, is that what he said to her? But guess what? She's Mexican, so guess what? Es verdad. That is true. And so, I mean, I'm just saying, I think that getting the story right, because I see Eva Longoria, they have this this show on CNN where you're going to find your happy place, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And she's finding it in Spain. Now, she's someone who here is Latino, she's Hispanic, Mexican American. Okay, how's your happy place in Spain?
Yeah.
Okay. No, no.
You're speaking of history. I want to go back to the HBCU just for a moment. You speak of the church and HBCUs, just so folk will know. Many of the HBCUs were founded by people that didn't look like us.
Yeah.
White men who wanted to educate their black children.
Yes.
Yes,
that is true.
That's how it worked.
Out of the church, and white men who wanted their children to be educated because they could not, and they would not allow them to go to the other schools. Economics, race, and class. That's what we're looking at.
They took care of their children.
That's right.
So knowing the true history, and I agree that we need to know all of the people's history and have a recommended book list that we're pushing that families get, so that we can be well educated on the true history of every group in America and around the world, so that when we look at the world, we're not looking at it through the brainwashing that happens in these institutions of brainwashing, but we're looking at what actually happened. Read the authors that are writing about their people, not somebody else writing about them, and observe what happened. Follow the money so that we understand where political policies come from. And when there's an exploitive policy, understand who's behind it and who's getting paid. So when we see the divide and conquer strategy, we can speak to these groups and say, do you know that they're using you? They're exploiting you. They're putting you against me so that they can use both of us. Don't fall for it.
That's why you need to know John Henrik Clark, J.A. Rogers, and Howard Zinn.
Yes.
And others.
Yes.
Because there are people who have taken the time to say, wait a minute, we got to get the story right. Once we get the story right, we can be right.
Yes.
But nothing is going to work until we work all of these things out. The Jewish
Not only to get the
Leslie,
story right, we need to acknowledge the story.
absolutely.
Yeah,
But you know what? We're the ones who have to do it. We can't depend upon
That's
other
what I'm
people,
saying. We have to
right?
acknowledge
Always
the real story. Right.
You know, but
And
but
if they say spread the good news, I learned that from the
what I've
Christian
appreciated.
church.
Absolutely, but no, it's true. But that's what I've appreciated about the Jewish community.
Mm-hmm.
The Hebrews
They always tell their story.
They do, although I don't think at the moment I would say that the white Jewish community is exactly a model. I mean, if you're talking about a community that has completely ignored and tried to wipe out another people's
We just said it was a true story.
No, I'm speaking of not what you're taught. I'm speaking of the idea.
The idea.
Okay. The idea. When I say the idea, there's something because you know a lot of misinformation clearly has been fed because you can see that. I get it. But what I'm saying is taking the time to teach your children. See, my mother and father took the time to explain history to us. And then when our friends would come over, they would explain things to us. And it takes that kind of intentionality to help your child function in this world, Leslie and Livonia. Because
I am because of my background, I'm very familiar with, the education I received as a young Black person growing up in a Christian community. But I'm also very familiar with the education that the majority of white Jewish kids get in synagogue, in Jewish day schools. And I'm really sad to say that it is a very destructive view of history. It's what some call the lachrymose version of Jewish history. It's a history that isolates the marginalization, the oppression of the Jewish people from all other forms of marginalization, that insists that that particular form of marginalization is unique, has nothing to do with the oppression of African Americans, has nothing to do with anti-Blackness, with Islamophobia, when in fact, anti-Semitism, which began in white Christian Europe, a Christian system that was by definition against Jews, but also against Muslims, against Blacks, against Africans, the same system that exploited Africa through slavery and colonization. Anti-Semitism developed out of that whole toxic mix. It is not unique. It is not something that can be solved apart from all of these forms. And yet, unfortunately, if you grow up in a typical American synagogue, especially since 1967, you go to a synagogue with a "We Stand with Israel" sign out front and an Israeli flag inside, and actual prayers and hymns to the Israeli Defense Forces, and prayer books that consider the Israeli Declaration of Independence to be holy writ. So yes, there has been an intentionality, but it has been an intentionality that has pushed a lot of white Jewish Americans away from forming true solidarity with other marginalized groups, which is very, very dangerous. And there have been many attempts to work around this. There was a wonderful Jews for Justice initiative in the 70s that was working with working class African Americans and was working with Latino Americans and with immigrants. And there was the movement called the Bund, which was more of a socialist Jewish movement that was working for the emancipation of all lower income people. But unfortunately, and this is what we are seeing with things like the ADL appealing to the right wing to get rid of immigrants because immigrant caused the attack in Boulder. So that's a reason why we need to get rid of undocumented immigrants. That particular telling of the story has not been something that is, I believe, good for the Jews or really good for anybody else.
But we have seen that expressed in the racism that we've seen emanate from the community. So none of that is None of that is new. And
They attacked the Black Lives Matter movement. When the movement for Black Lives came out with their platform, every single Jewish organization attacked it.
Rabbi Meir Kahane tried to kill Reverend.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just the Jewish Defense League.
Yeah.
When we went to the Middle East, we never had any peace. I'm not mad at anybody. I get where it was coming from because we had the Black Hebrew Israelites who went to Israel, and they came back and they were telling us what they were going through because they needed us to help them. We got it.
They have that same hierarchy of racism that we have in the United States.
No, trust and believe. Anytime they most of them are Ukrainian, and they're European. They don't even relate to the Jewish people who are indigenous to the region. So,
we talk about the history of how this group of Europeans adopted Judaism and then claimed that heritage in our book, Slavery, the African-American Psychic Trauma. It's a very specific year where that happened. Yeah. And all of a sudden, these Europeans are claiming a Jewish heritage that they don't have. So we need to, as we say, know the history of people so we know what's really happening and who they really are.
But what we need to understand is that I'm going to use the rainbow push concept. The people who put rainbow push concept together, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Dr. Martin Luther King, and many others, they knew and they understand, Leslie, what you have shared with us. They knew that they understand that, but they understood that separate we could not move the needle forward.
Make it.
Right. We couldn't do it alone.
Because
so
wait, let me just say this to you here.
Growing up, we saw marches, they're hand in hand, arm in arm. It was a fact. It wasn't like we made it up. Boots on the ground, as they would say. It was Jewish individuals, Christian individuals, Catholics, all sorts of folk, hand in hand. They understood. And when they went back home, let's say they probably did exactly what you suggested.
They rained down on Reverend when he was in Israel in '79, and he was at a museum, and they were talking about the Holocaust. He said, as awful as this was, as awful as it is, it was not unique.
Or the worst genocide in the world.
No. By saying that, he became public enemy number one, which is why, even as a national merit scholar with top SAT scores and a top ranking at the top high school at the time in the state, my mother knew that when my father told me, I want you to go apply to Harvard, because I had a full scholarship to Howard and Spelman already. And I was like, I'm good with that. So, because you all won't have to pay for school, and that's great. Well, my mother didn't want me to go to the interview by myself because of what they had been going through. And this is 40 plus years ago. So I'm hearing you, but I just want you to know, newsflash, that's no news to me. I'm totally getting it. What I'm saying is, Black people you had the Highlander School that trained you to get involved in the movement. And what James Bevel, who really brought my father and mother into my father knew Dr. King already, but he pushed for Reverend to be on the staff. They would train you. You were going to class throughout the week and learning. And guess what? Sherry, Doug, and I, the Bevel kids, we sat at the knees of all of that. And our parents were very purposeful in bringing other kids who were around in to learn. And you can tell because of our thinking. And I'm simply saying that is something that we need to do. I'm not saying that you got to tell people the truth.
You've got to tell people the truth. But, another thing that I'd like to say, I mean, yes, it's very important that people do that individually.
Hold that thought, because I'm going to have to sign off, but we can continue.
Okay.
If you're watching the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and come to it, everybody, guess what? You'll be able to get more of this conversation. But as for now, AM 950 Radio family, we've got to sign off. Leslie Williams, Jewish Voice for Peace, my dear sister, Lavonia Perryman, journalist, award-winning journalist, and Naima Latif. She is going to be back in a hot second, everybody. The female solution, global radio and TV show. You've got to see it. It's every day on YouTube. They're talking about Burkina Faso today. Here, of course, every day on AM 950 Radio. And I am also on the Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson radio show. AM 950 radio, everybody. God bless you. Okay. Continue, Leslie. I just had to keep on going.
Well, the thing is, it is not, I mean, it's obviously important for us to know our own history. It's important for white people to know our history. And it's important to claim that our tax dollars are funding the public education system the same as anybody else's. And we have a right, and I think we have an obligation to make sure that our story is told in those spaces for the Black kids that are going to public schools who may not have people doing that at home, but also for the white kids. You know, when Ta-Nehisi Coates went down to the South because they were trying to ban all of his books, because, you know, his books made white kids feel uncomfortable and made them feel that they were ashamed of their country and ashamed of their history. And he was saying, I don't want you to be ashamed of it, but I want you to take responsibility for it. And I want you to realize that you have a responsibility for it. And that's why I feel it's important for my books, which do tell the true story of American history, and why it's important for Howard Zinn's books and Malcolm X's and Asada's and Leroy Jones, all of those books to be in public schools, to be in the curriculum, is so that all Americans truly understand that history and will take responsibility for that history.
Yeah, because these are men and women, whether they received their training in the academy or not, and most of them did, but many of them did not. Not most, but many. And sometimes maybe not being in the academy worked to their advantage because they weren't brainwashed by the academy. But that's another story for another day. But that's why I've enjoyed reading J.A. Rogers' books about the history of Blacks in Europe, the Black presidents that we've had. I mean, that was part of the pushback. What was it on? Was it Herbert Hoover? Was that he was of Negro blood? That was the push on. I mean, that was the Eisenhower.
That's right.
I mean, and if you read books that were written about him in his time, they talk about that. Now they'll whitewash that today, but I always, I'm a true bibliophile. I go to old bookstores and find first edition, try to find everything.
Yeah.
So because the first iteration of history generally kind of gets it right, they, scrub it. You know that, you're a librarian, you know that better than anyone.
Well, I think the part of it is it's how close it is to the event, but who you are asking to describe the event.
Absolutely. Well,
I'm sure the Hoover Institute at Princeton is not going to be talking about that. I'd be really surprised.
They don't have, but I got the book. And you know what? Not to mention the fact that Black people are an oral people. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew in South Carolina that Strom Thurmond had a Black daughter. Mm-hmm. The biggest open secret. Now, as a child, I didn't know anything about it because it would have been inappropriate for me to have known. As I got older, you said, oh, okay, well, yeah, she went to South Carolina State and everybody knew because the senator used to come and see about her, and she knew Miss Essie. Everyone knew her. My grandmother knew her. Everybody knew her. And particularly, it was very interesting. And J. Edgar Hoover, everyone, if you looked at him, the joke on the FBI, on the force, was that he had to be Black because of his coloring. Kinky hair, all of that. I mean, when Jackie Kennedy was at Miss Porter's boarding school, when her father came there, because remember, he was French, but he was from New Orleans. Need I say more?
Yeah.
He said, Jacqueline, I did not know that your father was a Negro. She used to have to get her hair twice a week in New York. Twice a week. I ain't mad at nobody. I ain't mad. I'm just saying, we have to start telling our history and listening to the oral history, because that's how we have passed things down. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover's family were told, if you utter anything about his history, we will no longer exist. So they stayed quiet for a generation after his death because they were afraid.
Wow.
Yeah, but they held on to his information. But when you saw pictures of him in color, you said, oh. And when you heard, and then you got the gossip when you read different tellings of his story, you get the gossip, and you read in the footnotes that the FBI agents would laugh about their smart Negro looking director, because
Ooh.
more white people are blacker than they know in the United States.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's use the Pope for an example. The entire family of the Pope. I mean,
Yeah.
they have this. They decided several decades ago
Yeah.
that as they say at the dinner table, to pass for white. They
Mhm.
decided that.
Except for when he walked out on that balcony, girl.
Right. They decided that, but they decided that decades ago.
Well, they were from Louisiana too, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But when you look at them, that's why I say, wait a minute. If that's your story, I'm sticking with it. I'm not mad.
That's
at you.
right. They
I
decided
just
that.
know what I see.
Yes.
I'm not mad. There was this woman sitting in my grandmother's kitchen, my father's, and her husband was she was married to a very, very big guy in the South.
Mhm.
And when she walked in, quite honestly, I thought she was a cousin, because that's most, if not most of my father's family looks like that. So and every time I went down there, I met somebody. So I'm talking to her, and she was so lovely, and she was so warm and engaging. I just was, okay. And when she left, and she was lovely and beautiful woman, I said, well, I was a little confused, because when I got her name, I said, well, Grandma, I thought she was, I said, she's white? She said, well, so she's been told, honey. Wait a minute. Bless her heart. Now, they're Southern people.
Family decides.
Yeah.
Generations ago. Just think about this. The Pope's, I did a little study. The Pope's grandfather, let me get it right. Grandfather's father came through Haiti. Now they say came through Haiti. They didn't say that he was born in Haiti. They try to whitewash the story.
Yeah.
He came out of Haiti and then ended up in New Orleans. That's how they ended up in New Orleans. Grandfather, Haiti, came to New Orleans. And all of a sudden the story changed the next day that he was on a ship. It's as all he was
like he didn't stop.
like he didn't stop. Like, he had a cruise ship and he got off at this embarkment. No, he was born and raised in Haiti, the grandfather.
Wait a
And
minute.
he ended up. This is
Livonia.
true.
Livonia.
So, Santita, I'm going to have to go.
I love you.
All right, Leslie, take care.
All right,
nice meeting you. Right, thank you. True story.
But Livonia, when you say you don't even have to go through all that. I got the evidence when I saw him. I went.
You see it? You saw it?
I said,
Chicago. You don't come to the south side of Chicago just by accident.
No. Because where I live on the south side was not black. Even Gail Sayers, in my immediate neighborhood, he was our neighbor. Blocks up. If you read his first memoir, I Am Third, he talks about George Hallis, the owner of the Bears, and this was the biggest running back of his era. He and Jim Brown. George Hallis, the owner of the Bears, bought his house. And you thought, wow, how generous, how nice. Well, isn't that nice? He bought that for his star player. Well, no, this was the rub. I was at the funeral of one of my friends growing up. And it's a nice little neighborhood that we grew up in. And they were all regaling us with stories as they talked about Ramsey Lewis Jr., as they talked about, moving into the neighborhood around the same time, the mid to late 60s, because the neighborhood had been restricted. So Gail Sayers, who was one of the biggest stars in the country at the time, could not buy the house 2 blocks up from us.
Oh, I see. Yes, that happens here. Yes.
The owner had to buy the house. And then deed it to him.
Wow.
And I said, oh, wow.
Right.
And, and I looked at my parents very differently. I said, wait a minute. You all were like desegregating this neighborhood. And my mother said, no, we didn't. And it was just 2 blocks from our apartment. But this part of Chicago was not where Black people live. We were redlined out of South Shore. It's a lakefront community.
Right.
It was a Jewish community, and what they turned into the Park District when the neighborhood turned to black was a country club. Several of my friends had horses that they had that were housed at the country club.
Right.
In the mid to late 70s, they turned the country club into a park district. Boom.
I remember. Yeah.
Too many black people.
A Jewish man had to buy my dad's house for us. A Jewish.
Okay.
Wow.
A Jewish man's name was on the deed.
Okay.
Because in the community, they had a covenant that you could not sell to black people in the neighborhood. And it's still going on, guys, in Michigan.
But it's still going on here. So I'm just saying, but that's why I was saying, and even, hearing Leslie's stories, hearing everybody's stories is very important because, she's black and, and she converted to Judaism. And I think her story is fascinating and it's important for us to know because it's part of our story.
Yes.
It's part of the story. But it's like, Leslie, we are very clear on the racism in your community because that's what Langston Hughes wrote about it 70 years ago. And Sam Cooke was fighting against it.
I didn't know about Sam Cooke, but I know about Baldwin and others.
Because his manager, he was on his way to see his manager when he was killed.
Oh, okay.
When Etta James saw him in the casket, she said, they killed him because his nose was broken, and she said he was decapitated. Decapitated does not mean that your neck was cut off. It means that your spine was severed. The top of your spine was severed from your skull. And she said,
I didn't know that. I'm news to me.
No, but if you look at the pictures of him in the casket, you can see his head is unnaturally tilted down. And if you see pictures of him at the murder scene, you see that there was a struggle. He had a partner, Mr. Klein, who he was working with because he wrote all this music and he was signing. I mean, and he owned his music and was convinced and was working with Muhammad Ali and others to own. Muhammad Ali, since you're moving into boxing, own yourself. I know about this. I know about this Louisville Mafia. You got to get out from under the Cassius, because that's what he was at the time. And then he was talking to all of the big black artists because he was going to bring Aretha Franklin under his wing. He said, you need to own yourself. And that was what he was known for on the circuit. And that's why all the people, because I knew Jerry Butler, I knew all these people, thank you, God. Gene Barge, they all knew. They said there is no way that Sam Cooke, number one, he never would have gone after a woman. He was too much of a gentleman. And Sam Cooke, women loved him, so he had to lock himself in his room to keep them away from it. So he did, and he was not that guy.
He wasn't.
And when people, and it has been alleged that that when he got to the motel, that he had already been beaten to death. Because his body looked like he had been beaten severely. Because he was going to meet, he looked up and he found out that his business partner had written his contract so that he owned all of his music. He was that was a Thursday night, Friday morning that he was killed. He was due in New York on Sunday to confront him and get his music back. But when he was killed, Jackie Wilson,
all these stories
that went poof.
Wow.
And the media, Jackson. Right? You saw Michael what the story Jackson, was. He was a womanizer, and a woman killed him.
That's because he liked women. That's all.
Well, now it's time for us to bring the truth out. It's time for us to bring the truth out.
Michael Jackson, Sony owed him so much money he could have bankrupted the company. So suddenly he's okay, that poof. Bill Cosby owns his portion of the Cosby Show.
Yes.
Poof. Yeah. That's what you have done. I mean,
and they destroyed him.
This is why we got to tell the truth. This is why we got to have our independent voices. This is why we We got to be fearless and telling the truth story, clear these people's names, and make it transparent so that people see things differently when they hear a lie. In the other media, they can recognize a lie when they hear it.
I'm just saying, I'm with you, Naima. That's why, I'm about to start a project where I'm going to start talking about telling these stories, because there's a reason that Michael Jackson came.
That's right. Tell us.
Because Reverend, he said, the only person who can save me is you.
Isn't that something?
And Reverend was the one who
somebody who's not afraid to speak,
because they were going to take his entire fortune for pennies on the dollar.
So what happened with Bill Cosby? How did they maneuver?
The thing is, see, that's why I'm saying this whole thing with Epstein.
Yes.
People, what did Chris Rock put it this way: a man is as faithful as his options. Okay. People do what they do. Okay. I'm not gonna get into that. All I know is where I step away. And I don't want any of that kind of life. Okay. But that's just me. Whatever you do, when I say you, whatever one does, that is your business. I just know where I come in and where I gotta leave. And I just know up here, the rules are real different. There are no rules, and people do all kinds of things. That's what they do. Okay. So when you start going after someone's personal life on the power thing, I can't buy into that, because I know that that's not what this is. I know you all are the most immoral, amoral people in the world. So you don't really care who's sleeping with whom and what ages they are. Y'all don't care about that. And that's why I was saying,
you don't.
let's stop talking about religion in terms of the Mideast conflict. That has nothing to do with it. This is about land and minerals and oil and ownership. That's what this is. So
it really is. It's about money and power and resources.
That's all it is. That's all it is. So slavery was not about thick lips and nappy hair, as my mother puts it. No, it was about we're agriculturalists. You don't bring people over to work your land who are lazy, and you don't bring ignorant people over to work land that you can't figure out. Okay, so just stop. So I'm just saying, all of this stuff, we need to just stop, y'all. Just stop, and let's look at what's really happened. What the Chinese have done is something that Europeans did not do, which is cut deals with the Africans. They said, "You have something I need. I have something.
Yes.
Let's work together." I can respect that. They did not go in there doing what the Europeans did. I mean, because the part of the what's blowing our minds about Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and now it's spreading throughout Africa. What's blowing our minds is that they are now confronting France, and they're saying, "Wait a minute, this CFA agreement doesn't work.
Right.
We want your hands off of our money. We don't want to work. We don't want to use the franc anymore. We're tired of that. We want you. We don't need to go through you for you to take our money and then you give it back to me with interest. We're not going to do that. No. It's just, what did Reverend used to say? Land's changing hands.
Yes.
That's what we've got, and we just have to be. We have to understand. We have to have another understanding of history, and of the story behind the story. You got to know that what we see ain't what's true. The people that they always make indecent people look decent, and decent people look indecent.
Yes.
That's the game.
That's true. That's true.
And so
that's true.
Hey, as my mother says, Chief, I'm out. Because I know where I came in on this. I didn't come in. I mean, there's a reason that my parents have kids that are halfway sane. Yeah, because they're halfway sane. And there were things that they were not going to tolerate. Just for all whatever rumors y'all have heard. No, my parents are Uh, they, there were things that were not going to go on in their household. And
Mhm.
when I
Or
went
in the organization.
and in the organization, you didn't hear about
No,
crazy things happening to children
no.
because
That's right.
we didn't do that.
Mm-mm,
No,
mm-mm,
no, no, no. We didn't do that. We didn't do
mm-mm.
that. When I went to an event with my father, at one point, he was holding my hand and we were walking out the door
Mm.
because you're not. It wasn't even stated.
Ooh,
You ain't staying here. You coming?
no,
When I got
no.
when
I'm
I
having you
wanted
to.
to sing, I had an opportunity to get a record deal with Solar Records. Dick Griffey was a very dear friend. He had LA
Yes.
and Babyface just before they hit, right?
Ooh.
And I had known Dick Griffey since I was very young. He had no idea that I could sing at all. And he said, oh, when he heard me, it took him a week to listen. I like 4 or 5 days I was in California before he would listen to my little demo tape. And I was so
Mhm.
timid as a singer. And he said I was really afraid to listen because I was trying to figure out how I could tell my brother that his baby could not sing. He said, but I'm shocked that I could sign you right now because I think you could be one of the best. And I'm just trying to figure out. And my father said, oh, okay, let me take you to Roberta. Roberta's secure enough to have a Luther Vandross as her background singer and then push him out front.
Mhm.
He said, but you know what Roberta is, Sandy? I said, what, baby? I said, what, Daddy? He said, baby, she's a teacher.
Mhm.
He said, Roberta she was midway in her dissertation when Atlantic offered her a record deal. And
Ooh.
she got a full scholarship to Howard at 13, Naima.
Wow.
She
Now
went
that's
at
you have
she
not
went
heard.
she went at 15. I said it at her funeral. She went
Wow.
at 15. Her parents made her wait 2 years.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so he
Yeah.
said, now, and Roberta's gonna be honest with you, because she came out of the academy,
Right.
that
Right.
is a university, she would have told me, no, you need to go to med school, law school, whatever it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
Don't even do this. She
Mhm.
heard me and said, I had no idea. Now I want you now, we need to start studying. I stayed with her off and on for several months because I was still living in DC. Every time I went up there, I had to go see Joan Lader, who was her voice teacher. So she started me on my, because everybody, if you couldn't sight read, if you worked for her, you had to have a heck of an ear because she was a brilliant and trained musician.
Ooh.
And everybody around her was very
Mm.
trained. She said, I'm not taking a chance on you. She said, because you're quick. I've known you since you were a child. I know she's a teacher. So she said, so I know you can catch something quick. So I'm not worried about you. She said, what you need is you need confidence, which I did not have.
Mhm.
And you need to understand your gift.
Mhm.
That's so my father was always, and he said, now, and she said, now, and furthermore, this is a nasty business, and your father knows that I
Oh
will.
yeah.
He
So
Mhm.
true.
knows, he knows out of everybody, I am not going to have you in any mess. And she would not. I could not go
Mhm.
anywhere unless I was going with her for the first 2 or 3 years I
Mhm.
lived there.
That's good.
Mhm.
That's good.
She took me everywhere, and sometimes places I didn't want to go. You know, if Miles Davis was having a little something for his book signing, okay, so I went, but I had to be with her.
Mhm.
Smart. Smart.
Well, not only
Continue.
that, she was just that kind of person,
That's
and
good.
And
she
I
was the
was on
kind
the
of person.
other end. I was on the other end of the music industry. I had offered, like LeBaron Taylor had offered me a position with CBS to do public relations and media and marketing.
Remember when he did the big party at the caucus?
Yes,
Remember that?
absolutely. I
Yeah.
sure do. And so I was
But
offered, and I was
wait a
so
minute. Stop,
excited. Go ahead.
stop, stop. Wait, Naima. She is
Yes.
also, as you can see, she looks like a model. Now you're brilliant. I ain't
Oh
mad at you. I ain't mad at you.
yeah.
Mhm.
But no, because it's a looks-driven industry. Let's be straight
It
on.
It
Let's
is.
is.
be
It
honest.
really is. That's what it was. I could have been walking with three another eye in the front of my eyes, and they would have said, "Okay,
Yeah.
let's sign up." But what
Yeah.
I'm trying to share with you,
Now I'm
the
just trying to say when he saw you, he went, and then he
yeah,
heard you, and he went, okay, great.
and he did, and he told me later. He told me later. JT of Cool in the Gang, lead singer. When I
Yes.
told him, I was so excited. I'm his godchild's godmother. I was so excited. Oh, CBS, blah, blah. And he told me, just like what your dad and Roberta said, Lavonia, you will not last but a week. Because when they asked you to go get some drugs, I'm gonna tell you what he said, or get something else for the people, for the artist, or write something that is not true, you, Lavonia, you will not do it. You will not do it. So he said, you will probably stand on the table in the middle of the meeting with all these men and say, I'm not doing it. Nope, not me. They would say goodbye. See you later. And I would not have a job. I did not take the job. He said it's a cruel, is it exciting? But for women at that time, they could eat you alive.
Wow.
And you know that.
Yeah.
It was a cruel, and they would call on you to do things that he said, I would not do. Like you said again, my limit, I'm gone. I'm out of here. They used to call me the elusive one. I would disappear.
I believe that.
Wow. I would not participate. I wouldn't care what you were doing over there. And and the thing about it, you know this. You, Santita, you could have been on the stage with Mariah Carey. You were on the stage with Roberta Flack. I'm telling you, Naeem, I'm telling you, she could have made a choice. You made a choice. I had to sit there and say, okay, I could hang out with the past. I could be Nine Roll. I mean, I'm from Detroit, Motown. I'm like, yeah, I could travel.
But you're also Washington.
I had to give up what I had to give up.
Yeah, you got to know what price what price are you willing to pay, and if the price is too high.
But she was also at that nexus of power in Washington. So you were in Detroit, but you were also in the mix in Washington.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's why a LeBaron Taylor would say, okay.
He did.
Because DC is it's the center of power for the Western world. Okay?
Yes, it is.
And she was in the mix in the middle of that.
And you had to make a decision because you had to figure out what are you willing to give up.
That's it.
Every time, what are you willing to give up to be all that you can be over here? And now you're able to maneuver it. At that point, it was bigger than me. It was bigger than me.
And you know what? And the thing is, if that's what you're willing to do, okay.
Yeah, so be it. Do it.
I just know
accept the consequences of your choice.
I'm not gonna even get into all that. That's what you're doing. I'm not mad at you, Bo.
Me either.
Okay. This is what I'm doing.
Yes.
That's why I can tell you, I'm like, honey, I know I am. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Allergies, excuse me. I am a church person. And that's it. I mean, and people have to understand that is our base.
Yeah.
And that's our baseline.
That's right.
So we're political, but we're not politicians. So I could walk away from it and go, okay, I hear you all. And I get it. And I know that's what almost drove my brother literally crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Because he saw things that made
your star was rising and rising. And right.
It was just that's not who he was. And it was like, wait a minute, doing all this compromising for what? This is just wrong. And Jesse's always been very pure. That's why him going into the seminary to me made sense. He loved when he was at the University of Chicago. He would go fishing in the morning, about 4 or 5 in the morning. Then he'd go and he'd read his books, and he loves that. And I think if he ever does it again, if he would have another understanding of it. Jonathan has another understanding of it. And it's like even I understand how my gifts are to be used now. So now I'm ready to go. I get it. Yeah. And so, but you have to understand, and this is for everyone who might be listening. Robert said to you, Lavonia, very true and accurate, not much different for Black males on them jobs. Pretty much the first question, are you a team player to go above and beyond the call of duty? I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's all the
Yes.
Diddy trial is showing us. I mean, the thing is, they're just letting us know
Yes.
how it works. You know,
Yes.
just get over it. This is how it works. This is how it works.
And you can
trust-
sign up for it or you cannot. I mean, it's
and-
up to you to decide what are your limits and limitations, but not even limitations. Let me take that back. It's not limitations. It's how you want to move in terms of your life journey. How do you
That's
want
it.
to move in terms of your life journey?
What do you
How,
want?
what's your
I
journey?
mean, that's
Your
why
journey is
all these people who were in it,
yes.
every last one of them, they wanted it. They wanted
Yes.
something in
Say it loud.
exchange for. They all wanted it. So I'm like,
Say it to
all
the
of
people
them.
in the back.
Look, they wanted it. They wanted it. They wanted
Yes,
it.
they did. Yes, they
I'm
did.
saying all of them. His girlfriends, all of them. Children,
Yes.
baby mom, all of them.
Yes.
Because he was a guy who was powerful, and they would rather be associated with him than not. Cassie apparently, it was reported in the trial that one of Sean Combs' assistants said to her, "You need to leave him." She said, "But Jay-Z is already taken."
Mm.
I said,
Yep.
"Okay."
She chose to be there. And that goes against everything that people will say, well, you know, there's abuse. I get that part. I get all of that. But if you've been where we've been, we've been up close and personal to this, you know that this is a choice that she made and other people made. That's a fact.
Absolutely.
Jack, she made a choice. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to pay for the choices you make.
She made a choice, and that's it. And the thing
Yes.
is, because when you don't want it, you leave,
Yes.
and that's it.
Yeah.
And so, and
Free will.
everybody,
Yes.
and look, everybody, I'm not judging anyone. I'm just saying, look, if
No,
y'all gonna do
no.
RICO on this guy, do the RICO. Otherwise, you all are playing games. It's very clear that he is deep in, deep, 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 deep. And this is how you all do what you do. Gotcha.
That's it.
What
That's
did
it.
he do? What did he do for them to make this decision to take him down? That's
You know what?
what
No, Livonia, that's above my pay grade. I don't know. I don't want to know. Sis, I'm
he
loving
did
you.
something.
I don't care.
This has been going on for years.
Okay, and guess what? We ain't gonna take it from here. He knew whatever he wanted to do.
That's
I
right.
do.
Yeah.
I do. Wait a minute. I do Jesus and civil rights. That's it.
Even simple.
Okay.
Right. I hear you.
I do Jesus keep me near the cross. There, precious.
Right.
Pray to all.
Right.
Heal
Mine
us.
is Amazing Grace.
Flow
It's
from
the only
Calvary.
song I know.
Oh, near the cross. Oh, near the cross. Oh,
Mine is
there.
Amazing Grace.
Baby, that's all I'm doing. Okay.
Mhm.
No. My
Make
father
life
asked
simple.
me that one more thing. My father asked me when I was about to be driven to Howard University, because of course Atco was fired, so I couldn't fly, and I couldn't believe we were going to drive to DC. I said, "What? What are we going to do?" She said, "Your father may fly, but we're not flying. I ain't flying." You know, she was like, "I'm not flying anyway." She said, "Let your father do that. That's crazy, because these folks, there are no air traffic controllers. No." I said, "Oh."
Mm.
Mhm.
Honey,
That was Reagan time. Yeah.
Yep.
look, my father said, there's one more. No, this last thing I want you to do. Just one more thing. I'd had the birds and the bees. He gave me that one birds and bees talk upstairs. Before I got in the car, before we had a word of prayer, he said, "Wait a minute. Daddy has one more thing." He pulled me off to the side. He said, "Baby, I want you to just do one thing for Daddy. Just one thing." I said, "What is that, Daddy?" He said, "Find you a church." I said, "Okay." He said, No. He said, "You go to church every Sunday. I know that." He said, "But baby, the storms of life hit, and they hit without warning. And if your soul is not anchored in the Lord, you will surely drift away. And I will have failed you as a father, and I will not be able to live with myself. If I see that I have failed you as your father.
Wow.
Please, that's all I'm going to ask you to do." He didn't ask me to go to class. He didn't ask me about both. He gave me my birds and the bees conversation. It was real quick and it was real powerful. It stayed with me more than 40 years later. I lie down in the bed at night with a man who won't get up out of that same bed and marry you in the morning. That was all he said.
Real simple.
I said, okay. It was
All right, I have to remember that one.
He gave me that one. He said, no. He said, I love you, Mom. We got married, had you. That was that. But I'd always intended to marry your mother, and she knows that. I went to visit her mother, and her family, and that was how that went. I told your mother I was going to marry her. He said, yeah, I was talking, I was joking. He said, but then I got to know her best friend. He said, I had a plan. And 5 children later, here you are.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those oops babies. He said, yeah, lovely. But he said, no one had a shotgun in my head. He said, the truth is, we had 2 more, y'all, in 2 years.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. He said, and I have gone nowhere.
That's right. That's right.
And
just a beautiful couple.
And
a beautiful couple to me.
Well, my mother said, whatever you do, you better love someone who loves you.
Yes.
Now we're going to have a comedian on Thursday night. We need you, Naima, and you need to be there. He's a young man from Dallas. In fact, it's as God would have it, I just pulled his information because I said I want to interview him on the show.
Yes.
He took me through the looking glass. We're still running. He took me through the looking glass on marriage, on vows.
Ooh.
And in these vows, no one talks about infidelity. No. It's for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. And let no man, let nothing that God has put together, let no man
put us under.
Let no man put us under what God has put together. He
said,
that's it. He said, if you can do all of those things for richer, for poorer, he said, that's not just financial wealth. He said, that's spiritual.
Yes.
Sometimes you're just spiritually not well. Sometimes spiritually you're poor. Spiritually you're broke.
That's right.
In sickness and in health. Mentally.
That's right. That's right.
Physically, what is it? What?
Till death do us part.
As long as ye both shall live.
That's right.
And I said, wait a minute. We got this all twisted up. Because one of my girlfriends called me and she said, you're about the only one I can call about this.
Oh.
My husband, blah, 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 blah. I said, okay. And I said, now, so what does this have to do with you and these 3 kids you all have? He's a good man. Everybody's got issues. You marry a whole person. I don't know what issues are. I said, you do. And God knows it. Maybe you don't. That's why God gave him to you. And I know no one is perfect and you are imperfect in other ways. So my friend, I know that's why you called me, because I'm like, hang on in there. And now they've been married 35 years.
Wonderful.
I'm like, enough. So I mean, it's just, we have to grow up in, we have to grow up in how we relate.
Yeah.
We have to grow up.
Yes.
And just get honest. And really start talking about where we really need to be. Because because we're watching right now, what the record industry did, and that is becoming, there's a woman, Whitney Webb. I'm going to get her on my show, everybody. She's a brilliant investigative reporter. I'm going to send you some articles. She did a deep dive on Diddy and his connections, because they keep saying he's intelligence and he behaved like it. So he did what Epstein did with politics. He did it on politics and music. So you don't know what all this is. And I am.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
It's a lot deeper than the surface. You know that.
Yeah, I mean,
yes. No question about it. Absolutely.
Nobody cares about, like you said, nobody cares about anybody's personal life. Anytime they use that, it's for something else.
No,
what they did.
Right. This woman, they
absolutely
showed
not. But they showed their connections to the private prison industry. and how
Uh-huh.
what he did, and Russell Simmons and that group. Remember, they moved rap into hip hop. It was black
Mhm.
owned, and it was not,
Yes.
and it
Mhm.
moved into the jail culture, the prison.
Yes.
Mhm.
But
Yes, it
these
The
did.
guys,
outfits,
these
dress,
many of the
language,
many of the
visual.
many of the owners of the record companies
Mhm.
are tied to the prison industrial complex. They own the private prisons.
Mm.
Always say
It's
follow the
always
money.
what they've reshaped the culture.
Mm-hmm.
They did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
The
because
music
even
in
they've
our
gone.
community.
The women are on the poles.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Every big singer is a former prostitute or some.
Yes.
Now, mind you,
Yes.
I'm not hating on women who are in the oldest profession in the world. Some women, this you know what? Some people that is the way they eat.
Yes.
And I'm not been in that position, but some people there, and I get it.
Can't sell what people don't buy. So,
Okay, so I got it. That having been said, but that was something that we didn't talk about.
Mm.
We kind of, both of my grandmothers, everybody had my mother and father out of wedlock.
Mhm.
And as soon as they worked very hard to get away from that, they didn't want to be baby mamas. They wanted to be wives.
Mhm.
Yes.
And they never stopped.
Mhm.
Yes.
And I'm not denigrating anybody. I'm just saying to you, we've relaxed our morals
Mhm.
and we've
I
broken
agree.
our families.
I agree.
The
Because
first
raising a
time
child is a partnership, and when you don't have that partnership, it's a hard struggle for the children.
you can look at how these boys fight in the NBA, you see they have not had daddies.
You can tell.
Because when my brother was in court and they were about to sentence his wife, my brother asked if he could come to the microphone
Mhm.
because you could see that the judge liked him very much because she said it's very clear that he's had some kind of break because he's had a perfect record. This is a boy who's had a job since he was 15.
Mhm.
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 And so she
Mhm.
told she read his defense team the riot act. She said it's clear he's had some kind of psychotic break because in this 2 or 3 year period, this is not who he is, and plus he never handled his money
Mhm. Mhm.
because he didn't handle his money, Naima, because my mother handles all the money. But that's
Uh-huh.
what they don't do that. My mother takes care. My father said, I haven't written a check since we've been married.
Mhm.
Mm.
I make money, I bring it home. My wife takes it. He said, that's it.
That's smart.
He
Mhm.
said, but I can trust my wife to do whatever Jackie wants to do. If she wants to buy a house, she can do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's it. And he came to the microphone and he said, I accept full responsibility for everything because she was lighting into her. And she
Mm.
said, Your Honor, if you would, please, if you would indulge me, I don't want anyone to take, I don't want her to pay for something that my name was on. And she said, but Congressman, she, you weren't in charge of your money. He said, I take full responsibility. And furthermore, should you see fit to give her time, give it to me and let me serve it.
Mhm.
Wow. That's noble.
Well, because he was raised by a man.
It makes
Mhm.
a difference. It
Mhm.
makes a big
Mhm.
difference.
Do
Mhm.
you hear what I'm
Mhm.
saying to you?
It makes a
Mhm.
big difference.
Mhm.
Yes.
When my
It's a
father's had,
difference.
when my father's taking his hits, he's taking them publicly and he's kept on serving, no matter what
That's
Mm-hmm.
y'all
right.
said about him.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Sure
Kept
has.
on serving.
Mhm.
Yep.
In our in
So,
in Detroit alone, 68% of the households uh are ran by Black women.
Single
68%.
parent, single headed
Right.
and,
household.
and
Single
Yeah.
wait a minute,
family
and
home.
we take that as a badge of honor. I'm like, no, sis,
Yes.
you're
Ain't
not
that
supposed to be
something?
doing this.
Wait a minute. Right. You a badge of honor. I'm somebody's mama's baby mama. That's
And
a
a lot of
badge of
times,
honor.
a lot of
Because
these,
Oh no.
well, a lot of
because
these divorces have to do with economics. Well, he wasn't making enough money.
which is what
Well,
is
our parents, when we were sharecropping in the South, nobody had any money, but you worked together because
Naima.
that was
The
the goal.
teacher was always married to the janitor.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, my mom, dad is a factory worker. My mom,
Mhm.
40 years a teacher.
That's
What
right.
can I say?
You put that money together and you
Daddy,
paid those
factory worker.
bills.
Eighth grade education, daddy, mama, master's degree, teacher.
Wait a minute.
Mhm.
And what baby? And he said, baby, what else you need?
That's right. And he would come, he worked every day, two
That's
or three
right.
jobs, and it was five of us. Four of us
Mhm.
went to school. Period.
That's
That's
right.
what my father told me to look for. He said, you find someone who's
Mhm.
drug free,
Mhm,
hardworking, and with a capacity for loyalty. I said, that's it. He said, baby, if you get those things,
mhm,
you will have a
mhm.
lot. He said, you might make more money than he does, but you want someone who has enough self-respect to get up out of there and go to work and try to work and provide.
Yes.
He
Mhm.
provides what he provides because who knows? You might do this, he might do that. If he's a decent man who loves and respects you and gives you the space to be all you can be, that's all that he can want for you.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
want someone who's
right.
not going to leave you when the first cute skirt goes by, and they will come
Mhm.
by and they will come
They
up to
will
you.
come.
They do.
Right.
He said, and I
Regardless of
want him to
race,
be,
creed, or age. They come
I
by.
want him to be drug free
Mhm.
Hmm.
because you can't
Hmm.
make it if you're not sober. He said, after if you get those things, he said you will have gotten a lot.
Yeah.
He didn't
Those
tell
are.
me he needs to be doctor, lawyer, chief. No. He said, no,
Mhm.
no. It was character. I want to do a character
Yes.
check, not a credit check. You can
Yes.
clean up credit, character. I don't know how to work on
And
that.
fix that sometimes. Yes. That is the truth. And that's what we got to teach our daughters. It's our responsibility to correct the disinformation about what a man is so that they can see clearly. You're looking for character. It's not about a paycheck. It's not even about credit because
Yeah.
most of the time, if you're struggling, your credit's ruined anyway. So
And
it
most of
can't
the
be
time, if you check with your friend, if you check with your friends, and we all have friends like this who are married, who cleans up the credit? It's the female for the
yeah,
male,
yeah, yeah,
so the
yeah,
family
right.
can move forward. Usually, the
That's
female is
right.
in there checking on the credit,
Yeah,
trying to get it organized. And it's a
that's right.
unit, it's an organization, it's a company. It's two people trying to make
It's
sure
a
that the family
partnership.
is on
Yeah,
even playing field.
But
that's
that's why
right.
we
And this,
got to feel
and I want to say that
free.
this is not something. This is not pie in the sky. Every relationship is going to have drama. Every
Yeah,
relationship, they're going to teeter on leaving or staying. All
yes,
that's
that's
going to
right.
happen. But you got
That's
to
right.
make choices again. Once again, it comes back to what will you decide to take and not take? Where is your line in the sand?
Well, you
Right.
That's
know
what.
what? But see, but having said that, that is where we have to, it shows the brokenness that Black women have. Because,
Yes.
when she was talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the apex of the pyramid is interdependence.
Yeah.
Independence
Mm-hmm.
has to precede interdependence. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
many of us have daddy deficits.
That's why we
Mm-hmm.
make wrong choices. We go after things that have nothing to do with character because we didn't see character modeled in front of us, so we don't know what it looks
Well,
like.
and we're pulling on a man
Mhm.
because of our own deficits instead of
Yeah.
bringing to the relationship. We're not whole. And my
Yeah.
cousin put it so well. She said, two halves still make a half in a relationship.
That's right. That's right.
Two whole people make a whole relationship. Or if
Right.
we're trying to get there.
That's right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to, we have to have some real conversations
We do.
because
We do.
what we're doing is everything is really, really off, y'all. It's
We have
off.
to acknowledge that we all are work in progress. Each
Yeah.
my deficit is whatever it may be. It may be that I eat too much chocolate cake. I'm just using that as an example. You know, but I have to acknowledge that in order to resolve the issue
Yeah.
because that could complicate things along the way. Or I might be looking for a man who has 4 degrees. Well, how many African American men am I going to find at this point in my life? I'm speaking with 4 degrees and willing to take on, another person who is still on a journey, me. So you have to look at yourself
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
understand what am I willing to what am I willing to do and what are they willing to do? And like you said, can we come even with the deficits we each have? Because no one comes to a
We
situation
all have
perfect.
deficits, right?
No
Right.
one. No
Right.
one. Everyone thought I would marry someone that was 6'7". I married someone that was 5'7" and was, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Everyone thought. I mean, she only dates basketball players. I didn't even know a basketball
And when
player.
it came down to it, the height really didn't matter. Well, I married somebody that was 20 years older than me. You know, I mean, he was well preserved. I'm grateful for that. But there was a 20-year difference because I needed a level of maturity, and he provided that because he needed to have the maturity to allow me to be who I'm becoming still. But we had a great partnership, and I was there. And when he took his last breath, holding his hand, I was there till the end. And that was a relationship that my daughter saw. So I know she has standards of character that she's looking for, and she understands what character looks like because her father modeled it for her.
But but that's what we have to talk about. I mean, because at the end of the day, that's what I look for in a man. And I have found that I'm attracted to men who are very kind.
Yeah.
Because my father's very kind. And if a man is not kind, you've lost me.
That's right.
I mean, the last guy I was with, who I almost married, what attracted me to him was his kindness. And he's still a wonderful guy. We just had some other things that just weren't going to work. But he's still a very, very dear friend of mine. But he was so kind. He was a guest on my show. That's how I met him, actually. It was but I met him because a friend of mine said, you know what, I think he'd be a great guest. I said, okay, great. At the commercial break, the young lady who was producing for me, who was just someone I was training, she was wonderful. She came in and she said, who is this guy? He was so kind and compassionate. And Livonia, that's it for me. Because
kindness.
Because my dad is so sweet.
Yes.
And so
not just kindness towards you, but kindness in terms of
period.
Period. In terms of family and friends and how he approaches people, that kind of individual, someone who's kind and someone who makes me laugh.
Yeah. And Paula said she loves his candidness. And wait a minute, Paula, she's easy peasy. Love you, girl. Paula, you should come to Chicago. I love that. Paula, she's one of the original Morning Stars. She said,
"Oh, wonderful!"
And she said, "I love these stories, and I love this candidness." I'll keep it 100 with you. I mean, look, I'm not saying that I might get married. I could, but I tell you what I absolutely require, and because my brothers are very kind. That's why I enjoy being with them, because I remember when we were in college, my brothers, Jesse, Johnny, and I went to school at the same time. You remember that, Livonia. And it was one of the great joys. My friends and I used to go down to North Carolina A&T to the basketball game. And then my brothers would come up because if they were in the off season because they played football. So one time I remember it was a beautiful, DC in the springtime, you can't beat it. It's just great. It was just great. Cherry blossoms, all that. So my brothers called. They're like, we're coming up for the weekend. I was like, yay, because I love my brothers. I have big fun with them. So, and my girlfriends, I always had to tell them, particularly with Jonathan, I don't know what it is. Women love my brother Johnny. They love him. And I said, look, I don't know if he doesn't have a girlfriend right now, but please, y'all, I don't want to lose a friendship. Please leave him. Don't. Well, some women don't like him, but that was not my problem. And we went out to Georgetown, Livonia.
Yes.
And y'all, and I'm going to cut this off.
Beautiful area.
And we went to Houston's restaurant. And it was about 6 or 7 of my girlfriends, and we piled about 15 people into 2 cars. College.
Oh yeah, that's the way to go, babe. That's the way.
We got in there and we had all this food and blah blah. And so everybody went their little purses, and my brothers were like, "Wait a minute, stop, hold on, what you doing?" Everybody's like, "We're gonna pay for our meal." I said, "No, we don't know who you've been with. You're with us."
Ooh. All right now.
No, ladies. Jonathan just said, they looked at each other and said, "Oh yeah," they in unison. They said, "Oh, y'all needed some lipstick. You don't need anything else tonight."
Naomi, you know how girls are when we go to lunch or dinner or something. Everyone starts peeling off the receipt and our checkbook and who's going to pay 10%. That's just the nature of how we operate. But you know when a gentleman is in your presence. And he will see that, he will stop you.
So,
That's
I
when
got
you.
this.
They
Yeah.
stopped. I mean, my brothers were like,
And it had nothing to do with how much money they make. It's how they were trained.
they just melted. They went, oh Lord. I said, oh gosh.
Because it's unusual. It's unusual.
Well,
And that's,
I mean,
Because
and
a
they're
lot of
making it now.
a lot of young men were not raised by men, so
No, that's not the
and see,
norm.
all of their friends, their men friends, were like
Mhm.
that.
Yes.
And so it was like, honey, girl, we had a ball that weekend. You know,
That's
we
good.
had a ball. And when I moved into my first apartment in Washington, Jonathan was in town, and he said, "Girl, come on, let's ride around." And I loved riding around with Johnny. Just have fun. There's no one closer to me in the world than my brother. And he drove me out to IKEA. I was like, "Where are we going?" He said, "We'll get you some furniture for your apartment."
Mhm.
I said, "Oh no." He
Mhm.
said, "No, no, no, honey. We got my little blue table, my powder blue table, my pink chair,
Mhm.
my little
Mhm.
poops, all this stuff." He said, "You need something else?" And we went to another store. He said, "Let's get your plates." I said, "But I'm okay." He said, "No,
Mhm.
no." He said, "Yeah, yeah." He gave me a kiss. He said, "Enjoy your apartment, girl."
It's beautiful. Those
Well,
are
I got
beautiful
my
stories.
apartments after my brothers
Right.
did. But I mean, that's just who he is. He's like, "Enjoy your apartment, girl. Have fun. Have fun."
And stories like that about men, especially African American men, need to be told more often,
Oh
need to
yeah.
be identified, and we need to say it out loud to them to let them know we do see it, we do care, and we understand, because we have so many stories going after the brother, so many stories
Oh, I don't
fighting.
allow that. I mean, wait a
Mhm.
minute, Livonia, I don't
Mhm.
allow that. But I'm gonna tell
Yeah.
you something. My
Mhm.
mother told me don't limit myself to race. I'm gonna have to say
Right.
some, and I'm gonna shut everything off in 1 minute, you all, because I gotta go. There's
Yeah.
another guy who's we're very,
Mhm.
very close, and he's not black.
Mhm.
All right.
We were together down, where were we? I forget where we were. After a day, everybody, because my father came into town,
Mhm.
and we ended up, we were in town for something else because we were connected. He's a lawyer, and a friend of ours. Can you remember Mark Weiner, Livonia?
Yes, I do. Sure.
And he was like, okay, he can help you. I was like, oh, we ended up, we talked all day long. Went to the
Wow.
airport to get my father. Everybody thought he was my boyfriend. I said,
Mhm.
we met this morning. Seriously. And everybody was like, yeah, right. I said, no, we actually, we met
This morning.
this morning. This morning.
Isn't that something?
No one believed it. No one was kinder to me. No
Mhm.
one's been kinder.
It's a good
Mhm.
sign when you talk like that. Yeah.
When this whole baby thing exploded on my father, what, a quarter century
Yes.
ago now, almost.
Yes, indeed.
The first call I got was from him. He said,
Mm.
the
Real.
people who love you will always love you.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And he said, and this will pass. Then he and his father called me. They said, the
Mhm.
people who love you will always love you.
Always love
And
you.
and hey, if you want to come up here and spend some time, come on, just get away from all that.
Yes.
I was like, no.
Yes.
Well, I ended up doing that.
Hmm.
And I but it's the kindness, Livonia.
Yes.
And my mother told me, she said, you put that first.
Yes.
You make sure that you're with someone. My mother said, I told you, love who loves you.
Love
Yes.
Yeah,
who
and
loves you.
and I will
Right.
say, my mother was my father's idea. He befriended her best friend Tank, may she rest in peace, and wanted to make sure she went to, what was it, to Vesper, which was a church during the weekend. If she missed it, he was like, well, Jackie, why weren't you at Vesper? Why were
Oh.
you not at church? What is going on,
Mhm.
Jackie? She was like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't, yeah, I'm here to get away from my mother. What are you doing? He said, Jackie,
Mhm.
you're a good woman. You're a good young lady. You need to be. My mother said she said, I thought he was ridiculous. And she said, but when his mother would bring food, he would come to the
Mm.
dormitory and he would bring the cake. And
Wow.
whatever food she had, he would divide it in half and bring it to me and my friends.
Isn't that something
That's
beautiful?
And
nice.
if his
And
mother
it's still
sent some
going
money,
on.
oh
Right.
yeah. If
Right.
she sent him $10, he would come and give me $5.
Isn't
Wow.
that something?
It could
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
me cry
Yeah,
because
it really could. It really
well,
could. It's a
well, you know
blessing.
what? I just
Mhm.
that's what I've seen,
Yes.
That's a good
and
example
and
you have.
that for me is that's it. You know, you
That's
And
got to
that's a
love.
have.
real story. And I want to say, I know we got to
Mhm.
go because you got to call. Those stories, we must share those types of
Absolutely.
stories to
Yeah.
uplift our community. Those are the stories that give
Mhm.
our community hope. And the
Well,
brothers, because those are the kinds of
let's
stories we need to
let's
share.
do that at the convention because
Absolutely.
honestly, that's the
Yes.
Absolutely.
conversation. Honestly, I do that on my show because my thing
Yes.
is, I think that black men in particular, but men
Yes.
generally get a bad rap. My
That's
grandmother
right. I agree.
who said, "Let me tell you, the problem with the world is there are too many sorry women." I said, "Oh."
Mm.
My
Ooh.
grandmother would have been approaching 100 had she lived. She died in 2017, so she would have been
Mm.
about 98 now.
Mm.
Yes.
And she said, "No, no, 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 no." She said, "No, no, no. Women determine. We set the temperature in the house."
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We do.
She said, "So
We
no."
do.
She said, "No, no, no." And I'm gonna tell you, we're a direct reflection of our mother. That's why
Yes,
the
we are.
Bible tells
We are.
the book of Ephesians, is it? That
Mm-hmm.
says, "As is the mother, so goes the child."
That's
That's
right.
right. That's
So
the
So
let's
fact.
true.
let's be
So
clear,
true. That's
y'all.
true.
I mean, and you can say what you will with it, but what we have to start doing is telling the truth, because the
That's right.
world is falling and we cannot fall with it. Our
Not at
job is
all.
to overcome
We
the
got to
world,
lift it up. That's the power that
overcome the
we have.
world, and let
Yeah.
us be moral people. Because if we're not moral, if we're not godly, all of this is for naught.
Yes, it is. That's the
Right.
That's
truth.
it. I
Right.
love you, my sisters, Lavonia Perryman, Naima Latif. Hey,
Yes.
everybody. Check out the Female Solution Global radio and TV show every day on Facebook. Give them your support. Support them as they support us. Lavonia Perryman, we will all be together in Chicago the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th. And we're going to have a good time. Then we're going to have a little fun on the 15th on that Sunday. How about that part?
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
And
truly my pleasure to join you and everyone who is listening, no matter where you are in the country. Know that you are loved. Take care. Good
Yes.
night, everyone.
And that's right, everybody. Come on. Come on. We're going to have a great time at this convention. And we're going to have conversations just like this. I love everybody. AM 950 Radio, the voice of Progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show.